NFL free agency has not even officially begun, but Chargers fans have already taken a punch to the gut because the top two weapons available, DK Metcalf and Davante Adams, are off the table.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Davante Adams is coming to LA, but not to the Chargers. He is going to the Rams, and DK Metcalf indeed did get traded, just not to the Chargers. He went to the Steelers, and it just gives you that feeling that the Chargers miss out again. It just so frustrating. Yeah. You just want your team, your quarterback to get the weapons that you so desperately deserve and need to see them go do and be the offense that they should be. And also that brings you to the next point. The Chargers have a lot of money. They have $90+ million in cap space. They have not re-signed anybody outside of Elijah Molden. So what are they doing? And we're going to tell you what that free agency plan should be.
Yeah, and I think there has to be at least somewhat of a pivot with the top two weapons not available now. And that's where you have to start, because it does suck. Those were two really good options the Chargers had potentially available to them with Davante Adams and DK Metcalf. And it's before you could even be upset that Davante Adams was signing with the other Los Angeles football team, DK Metcalf is getting traded to the Steelers only hours after it comes out that the Chargers are one of his top options. You finally get a little bit of, smoke and some sizzle to maybe this really is going to happen. The first domino falls with Davante Adams, and the Chargers end up striking out on both of those guys. And before free agency even officially begins, you take a punch to the gut. Like I said, there's no other way around it, because it's not just about the Chargers not landing, a big time weapon, or just that they still can't go land a weapon. It just felt like these were clearly the two best options. Two guys that fit really well with what the Chargers needed, with Davante Adams, a proven outside receiver, still playing at a top level, and DK Metcalf, a big physical outside guy that's a field stretcher and would bring, a potential, total pair to Ladd McConkey for the next several seasons. And David, Joe Ortiz has an entire offseason still left. It feels like it's already kind of over to some extent, just because of how bad it feels at the moment. There's still a lot of time left, but there's no way to kind of not reel from losing both of these guys in the fashion that they did.
Well, and it all stems from the Chargers losing in the fashion that they did in the playoffs. And after that feeling, after what Ladd McConkey did, and only Ladd McConkey, the feeling was the Chargers have to go big game hunting. They need to go get the biggest, baddest monsters on the offensive side of the field to pair with Justin Herbert, to pair with Ladd McConkey, to get him the help that they obviously need. So yeah, this hurts. This sucks. It doesn't feel good. I wanted to see them go get one of the top guys to say, okay, let's check that box. They got one of the best receivers to pair with Ladd McConkey, to give to Justin Herbert, to go out there and be able to get some diversity to their offense. But they strike out and they miss out on both of the top options available.
Yeah, and it's really tough too, just because these guys felt like they were in a class above what the rest of the options that are still available are. And we'll start with the DK Metcalf part of it, because I do think this is something for Joe Ortiz, who's still a relatively inexperienced general manager, and this could be a philosophical thing about them not trusting big-time receivers to make big-time receiver money. But we do know that the Chargers were interested in DK Metcalf going back to last season, according to Jordan Schultz, and it ends up being a very steep price. Let's talk about that, right? DK Metcalf to the Steelers for a 2025 second-round pick. It's also a late-round pick swap between a 7th and a 6th-round pick as well, going in the favor of the Seahawks. But it also came with the signing of a $150 million 5-year contract with Pittsburgh. I don't know anything. I haven't talked to anyone. it feels like that part of it could have been, what led him to Pittsburgh, because we already wanted warm weather. We already wanted a contender. We heard all these things. He didn't really check any of those boxes, right? By going to the Steelers. It's almost, it's very different. And the Chargers, even if they were to offer a second round pick, the Steelers have a better second round pick, right? So then you're talking about your second round pick, and then you have to beat the pick swap they have. Like maybe you're throwing in a fifth round pick or something along those lines. So the price was really, really steep. Would another pick, would a higher pick of, tip the scales? Because you have Adam Schefter on SportsCenter saying the Chargers were proceeding carefully and the Steelers were the most aggressive team, which is why it gets done.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, I understand it. Like it is, in totality, a lot to have to offer to give up for one player. We're talking about a premium second round pick, including pick swaps in the later rounds, which I think that's kind of negligible in my opinion.
Sure.
The biggest part of this is the 5-year, $150 million contract. I think I'm with you on that. I just don't know, sitting here in, going into year 2 of this Harbaugh and Ortiz regime, they just don't believe in paying wide receivers that type of money. And maybe they'll prove me wrong when it comes to Ladd McConkey. If he is able to reproduce the type of season that he did in his rookie year a couple more times, then we'll see what they do about re-signing one of their own. But maybe that's in line with part of the philosophy that they said that they want to kind of build their team with. But it just makes you feel like this is a player that could have, really tipped the scales and changed the direction of what the offense looked like. But to give up 5 years and $150 million to a receiver that's about to be 28 years old, that hasn't had a 1,000-yard season in a minute, I think is probably something that is the reason why the Chargers decided to proceed a little bit more carefully than, say, they would for a younger receiver.
And at the same time, there's a price to kind of greatness, right? There's a price to
Sure.
a level of receiver that DK Metcalf is. There's also a dude in 4 playoff games that has 450 yards, 5 touchdowns, right? He's a guy who's produced on the biggest level for the Athletics since entering the league, 5th in receiving touchdowns, 12th in receiving yards, 16th in receptions. Does that mean, hey, I'm worth $30 million? You can debate it, but he's also a dude that's only ever missed 3 games in his entire career. At least 900 yards every season. You know what you're going to get from him. 3 drops on 108 targets last year. Like, he brings a lot to the table. An explosive player, 20 gains of 20-plus yards, 3rd in the league last year.
Yeah.
You know it. And that they don't grow on trees, dudes that are that size and run a 4.33. And Brian Baldinger put out a great post of just him cooking, some of the best corners in the league. That's what he's that's what he's capable of.
Yeah.
And it still felt like there was another level he could get to with Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it wouldn't have come with risk, to your point, right? 5 years, if it doesn't work out, you've nuked several seasons, right? As we saw with J.C. Jackson. If you're going to give out a contract like that, you have to be able to hit it. And I know that we want to see Justin Herbert with another legitimate option outside of Ladd McConkey, and for them to, cash in on the checks that they made in the offseason when they said, we're embarrassed by the way that we protected him and the way that we failed him in this playoff game.
Yeah.
They didn't show us. They haven't showed us yet.
Not yet.
And the move would have come with risk. I was a little bit afraid and a little apprehensive, especially for a 5-year deal. I was thinking 4 max, but we're talking about a dude who has a, contested catch percentage of 36.6 last year and 29, which was worse than Quentin Johnson in 2023. Doesn't always play to his size that way. Only 5 missed tackles forced, and also knucklehead behavior, right? Tied for 2nd in penalties in 2024, tied for 4th in 2023. I think the other part of it is how will his game age as a big receiver? We knew Davante Adams' game aged well because he's still doing it at a high level at this age. This is a dude who relies on his athleticism, his physicality to win. And now you're talking about a contract that's going to pay him until he's almost 33 years old. There's a lot of risk in it for a guy that hasn't ranked in the top 20 in yards per route run since 2021.
Yeah.
Last season, 100-plus yards in 3 out of the 4 games. He never did it again for the rest of the season. Didn't surpass 70 yards in the final 8 games of last season. Is that worth $30 million a year, David? I don't know, man. Like, it was risky for sure.
It was risky, but it's, like you said, you have to go out there and try to make a move to try to acquire that greatness. But this just wasn't one of the moves that the Chargers were willing to make. And so we'll have to see how they go about fixing this offense, because right now it leaves a lot to be desired on the doorstep of free agency.
And I think the big thing and the difference is between DK Metcalf and Davante Adams, who we thought were clearly the 2 best weapons available going into this part of the offseason. Davante Adams, you wouldn't even have had to give up a draft pick for. So what's the excuse there? Because I'll tell you right now, I would have paid him the money the Rams just gave him. So we're going to talk about that, and the Chargers not using that money they're hoarding to resign their own free agents, because you have a ton of guys about to test the market, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting, wondering, and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with the TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only on iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Dave, we talked about DK Metcalf, and now it's time to talk about Davante Adams, who we were going to talk about on Friday's show. He would have been our preferred option, right? He, I think, fits the timeline of what the Chargers want to do right now, and also doesn't mortgage your future like potentially a DK Metcalf trade. Now we know it was going to cost 5 years, so there was no way of that not being, at least a huge risk that you hope it pays off on. But Davante Adams, this one hurt. Davante Adams to the Los Angeles Rams, as you put it. And that just was a gut punch right there, because we talked about it before on the Buy or Sell show, right? If Matt Stafford gets traded, unless Aaron Rodgers goes to LA to replace Matthew Stafford, Davante Adams probably isn't going there. What do? They keep the man back together. They keep Matthew Stafford in town. They show you that they're going to make a push for another Super Bowl, which is what you want the Chargers to show you as well. Davante Adams ends up going to the Rams. 2 years, $46 million with $26 million guaranteed. Said he wanted to stay on the West Coast. He does. According to Ian Rappaport, he wanted to stay on the West Coast. That's why we thought the Chargers were, a great choice potentially for him and would have a chance at it. This is the thing. I've seen some people like, oh, well, he costs that, and then I'm out. This is always what it was going to cost. I would have paid him this in a heartbeat. This makes him the 17th highest paid wide receiver in the league right now, with potentially some bigger deals coming down there. I don't even know. That didn't even factor in DK Metcalf. But even DK Metcalf's last contract was bigger than the one that Davante Adams just signed. This one, David, we don't know. This is harder because I do think there was actual interest from the Chargers on DK Metcalf, even if they proceeded carefully, as Adam Schefter put it. We don't know how much interest there was from the Chargers to Davante Adams, but man, I see that deal and I say, you could have just checked off one of the biggest question marks you have going into next season, which is another weapon outside of Ladd McConkey. For that price, I would have done that deal.
It's really frustrating because this one, there's no comp pick situation that would have factored into it. He was available right away because he was released. All you had to do is just make the money right and make the contract right. He wanted to come to California. He wanted to finish out his career in California. Yeah. And you have a great quarterback for him to finish out his career with. And he's still, because of him being such a route technician, his ability to understand how to use what he does well and the intimate knowledge of what the defense is trying to do to him to find those soft spots, and his ability to go up and get the football in the contested catch situations, all were plenty of reasons why 2 years, $46 million. I mean, hell, 2 years, $50 million, and I still would have done that deal. Yeah. And it would have been negligible, in my opinion. $26 million guaranteed. This situation here, this one made way too much sense. But it just seems like a lot of the times when the deals make way too much sense, they just don't happen. And hey, maybe you look at it, it's a 32-year-old receiver, and maybe you're expecting, hey, well, the drop-off is going to come at some point, and I don't want to be in the situation. But it's 2 years. And honestly, a lot of the ways that the contracts have been, set up, at least by the Chargers with Ed McGuire and the previous regimes, there's been a lot of those ripcord situations where you're not really liable for the entire part of the contract. If it doesn't work out in 1 year, you can just pull the ripcord and be out of it. But this just seems like a deal that was really perfect for the Chargers to make, and instead the other LA team made the deal.
One, it kind of, without knowing what the interest level was, it feels like the Rams beat you in your own town with similar situations, right? Obviously, they won a playoff game last year. They're a team that won a Super Bowl. The Chargers can't bring that to the table. It was a more attractive situation to Davante Adams, and you can't even blame him for it. I mean, because like even look at the Chargers right now and kind of the instability of where the team is at heading into the legal tampering period. There's a lot of question marks about this team right now, and the way they ended last season with that loss. It's hard to sell Davante, hey, we're going to give you a better chance against in the AFC, the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allens and Lamar Jackson.
He's like, get me out of the AFC completely.
I mean, like, to me, I don't even think it's that hard of a decision. Like, you could say, hey, you know, Justin Herbert is better than Matt Stafford. You could make the argument. It's very, very close. Like, you know, it could really go either way. It's not a huge gap, I'll tell you that. Either way, it seemed like they were the most desirable destination for Davante Adams, which is why it would have been great to see Matthew Stafford just get out of LA and help the Chargers in this one. But again, it just feels like this was a guy that fit exactly what the Chargers needed, fit the timeline that the Chargers were on, and now the team across the street is making the more win-now moves, which has been the aggressiveness that they've shown through the Super Bowl run and now rebuilding it after Aaron Donald and post, you know, what that Super Bowl team was. And they're getting ready to gear up and make another run, right? And that's why you want to kind of see the Chargers do that. So you're telling me, I mean, you don't want Davante Adams because he would have signed for what Calvin Ridley signed for? I don't know, man. To me, this was a big miss by the Chargers. If they weren't that interested, feels like they should have been, because he would have really, really given them something and given them a real threat outside, a real factor in the offense that's not Ladd McConkey, which is all you want. And now it feels like those guys are dwindling. The guys you feel great about, the guys that you can just sign it and forget it and you know you're getting a huge upgrade, it's dwindling, man. And that wouldn't all be as concerning. But the problem is the Chargers haven't even really kept their core together of the guys they had headed into free agency. I mean, right now, as the Chargers are about to enter the legal tampering period, as you guys have heard this, the only guy that's been re-signed is Elijah Molden. Now, they can get some, 11th hour deals done for sure. But man, I told you I'd be concerned if they got to this point and hadn't re-signed a lot of these guys. And count me in the concerned camp for sure right now.
I mean, one of the things I remember from my childhood is my brother's about 5'6", 5'7", and I used to make fun of his height. I mean, he's like, well, if I sit on my bank account, I'm 10 feet tall, and I just couldn't say anything after that. The fact of the matter is the Chargers are sitting on their bank account, and they are 10 feet tall, but they're just sitting on their hands. They haven't done anything. They haven't re-signed any of their players outside of Elijah Molden. None of the 27 unrestricted free agents outside of the one has been given a new contract. So you're telling me that your philosophy is I want to pay my own, I want to take care of my own, I want to build through the draft. You haven't done any of those things. And as we get closer to that legal tampering period, it gets even more antsy because like you have multiple starters on defense, including Khalil Mack, Poona Ford, Tierra Tart, with Denzel Perriman, Christian Fulton. Those were all starters for you on defense. And then of course on offense, you have 5 more starters that you have to worry about that you have not done anything to re-sign. That leaves a gaping hole on the defensive line and a massive hole on offense, both in the middle of the offensive line and on the outside. There is a lot of holes to be filled, and you can't do them all in the draft. So you have to make sure that you bring some of these guys back. And if you get to that legal tampering period, right now, there's only one horse in the race. That is you. Once you open that up, now you're opening up to anybody and all these other teams to be able to bid for your pieces and go steal them away.
Yeah, and that is the double-edged sword of free agency, because it can go one of two ways. Either the guys that you have go and test the market and they realize maybe the market wasn't what they thought they were going to have, and then they end up coming back for maybe a little bit less. But the other part of it is the price could go way up. Right now, like Poona Ford is a dude that like it would have felt great if you could just go sign that dude for, before he finds out what his true worth is, to be honest with you, as far as, what he could get paid and what I would be offering him if I was another team trying to pry him away from the Chargers. Absolutely,
The Broncos just gave DJ Jones $13 million per season.
Yeah, I mean, the price is definitely going up, and maybe, that's the problem with having the success the Chargers did last year in one-year deals, is just the fact that these guys are going to need to get paid after that, because the whole point of it was to bet on themselves and raise their valuation, and a lot of them did that, but the problem is those were also all the guys that you wanted to bring back. You're not, out of those 26 unrestricted free agents, there's probably only 5 of 6 of them you're really sweating if you lose them or feel like they're kind of not irreplaceable, but will be very hard to replace. The Khalil Mack part of it is that, we knew he was going to test free agency. He's never tested free agency before. man, if they lose Khalil Mack, we talked about it before with the show. I mean, Poona Ford, J.K. Dobbins, Tier Tart. This looks like a completely different team, man. Like, this looks like, I don't know. You have to trust the process. There's so much of the offseason. So much of this has happened before the actual free agency is even opened up. But, man, when you see this stuff happening and you see the lack of moves, you see, you release Gus Edwards, but you don't actually sign anyone. You've released more players than you've re-signed to contracts, and Trey Pipkins is still on the roster. There's just a lot of question marks, man, going into what's going to be a very, very big day for the Chargers. But the good news is there are still some options available, and we're going to talk about the best weapons that are still out there now that the Chargers struck out on the top two, and also just what the plan should be now that we know what's happened before free agency starts. So we're going to get into that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First thing I need to tell you guys, though, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. And that's what this is all about. It's Cinderellas. It's 16 versus 1s. It's 2 versus 15s, and trying to find out who's going to pick up that big, gigantic upset. But my time right now is spent watching these conference tournaments to know when the big dance gets here, who should I be betting on? And you can always stay in on the action with tournament games happening almost every single day, so you can sharpen your skills so when the tournament gets here, you're ready to go, and it's all easy and fast, and the FanDuel app is super easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, David, well, now it's time for what's next. We know the Chargers missed out on the top two options, and now we're going to talk about the options that are still available, and there's still good options available to them. None of them are going to come with, I think the certainty you would have felt for those other guys. They're all going to come with big question marks as well. But thank you, as always, especially when the bad news comes out as well as the good news comes out, for always making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, I can't recommend enough the guys at Locked On NFL Draft right now, Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez, as they get you ready for where the Chargers are going to have to really hit on a lot of picks where things stand right now, as they get you ready every day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Dave, let's talk about the pool of guys that are still available. We've talked about the top receivers on the market still, and I do want to talk about the weapons that are still out there, which to me kind of all go in the category of, yeah, that could work out for you, but it comes with a lot of risk, and it's not going to feel like you've just solved that issue for sure, which I think the other two guys would have made you feel like. Still good options. And I think, we'll see what the Chargers are looking for by kind of who they target out of this group of, the wide receivers we talked about liking. Darius Slayton's not going to make anyone feel good as the best option that they bring in. But there's also guys like Amari Cooper. You have Stephon Diggs out there with still getting really no buzz at all. And you also, have Chris Godwin, who now is pretty easily seemingly the number one wide receiver.
He's the belle of the ball now. Yeah.
Now he is, man. And I think the hard thing about that is it feels like the Patriots are just going to jack that price up to
absolutely.
To the moon. Like, it doesn't feel real.
Well, they're going to have to. I mean, they're going to have to convince him, hey, that like we can win. Like we have the plan in place to be able to go get the players to make you feel like you're going to come to a winner. This isn't a rebuild. This is a reload. I mean, of course you have to try to, but hey, you know what convinces a lot of people to do whatever you want? Money. And a lot of it, and he is going to stand to make a ton of it. But hey, if the Chargers want to throw their hat in the ring, I think they have a very compelling argument as far as, hey, they got the quarterback, they have the coach, and they have the organization to be able to compete right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think the Chargers are going to get into a bidding war for Chris Godwin.
Probably not.
We've talked about, hey, he's the best option available. You feel like he's the next closest thing to a sure thing, and that's with a 29-year-old receiver who's coming off of serious injury. And the Patriots are very committed to giving Drake May everything, not only to give him the best shot this year to win games, but also to make sure they're giving themselves the best look at Drake May by actually giving him some confidence to work with after he looked pretty good as a rookie. And they seem committed to that. They have one of the, more salary cap space than the Chargers, which pretty much no one has.
They're the only team.
So that Chris Godwin would be great. I'm not getting my hopes up. Darius Slayton, obviously more just of a deep threat, right? He said, teams need chunk plays. I can give that to you. In his career, 15 yards per reception shows you that. 4 700+ yard seasons with Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, obviously not going to help your case there, but you're hoping that he can way outproduce what he's already done. It's not going to feel like you fix that option. And then you have guys like Amari Cooper and Stephon Diggs who are out there, guys who have shown they could do it at the highest level, but are coming off of serious injury in Stephon Diggs' case, and Amari Cooper who kind of just fell off the map in, two interesting situations between being on a bad Cleveland team and then trying to catch on with a team midseason like you did with the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, tough spots to be in, and you just look around and you see, like, there's none of these guys out there that make you feel like, hey, this is a guy that doesn't have any baggage, that doesn't have any issues that they're coming off of.
Yeah.
I mean, still some good options, some pieces where you feel like, okay, maybe Justin Herbert's going to be able to bring out the most out of this player. They're going to be able to maximize what they bring to the table, take them out of that bad situation, like the Darius Slaytons of the world, who has been playing with barely NFL quarterbacks, and bring him over to the Chargers and let him really stretch the field and be that element that has been missing from the Chargers offense. But it still gives you that feeling, no matter if it is Chris Godwin or Amari Cooper or Darius Slayton, it's not enough.
Not by itself, right? And that's the whole thing here, is it just feels like now you're going to have to spend premium draft resources to help the weapons on this team. And maybe that's just, the Ravens kind of showed that with the way they handled their wide receivers, more in the draft and then free agency for sure. But man, I love Ladd McConkey. It's going to be hard to find one. And this is not the nice thing is you had premier options available going into a draft class that's said to be weak at wide receiver. Like, that's why it felt like such a perfect fit. And these guys all bring you potential upgrades over what you had last season, for sure.
Yeah.
Darius Slayton's a guy who is a nice piece to add into something that's already working well, maybe just needs a deep threat. The Chargers need more than that. They need someone who consistently win on the outside, and they need someone they can count on outside of Ladd McConkey, as we saw in that playoff game. Amari Cooper, only a couple of years ago, he put up 1,250 yards and 72 catches. It's not that long, but last year he totally fell off the map once he went to Buffalo. 8 games, 20 catches, 297 yards. That didn't.
You can't
go the
say
way
it was
they
about
thought
the
it
quarterback, because he just won the MVP award. So.
Exactly. But that's a tough situation, right? Going into it. I mean, also just dropped a ton of passes last year, over 15% of his passes after never being more than 7.1% the 4 years prior to that. So you'd feel like that could come down and feel pretty good about it. Then there's tight end. You could also add weapons at tight end. I've seen a lot of people talking about Evan Ingram as an option who, only 2 seasons ago caught 114 catches. I'm not as high on that.
Receiving. Yeah.
What'd you say?
So 900 plus receiving yards as well.
900. That's the problem, though. 963 receiving yards on 114 catches. He averaged 8.4 yards per catch. I'm not as in on Evan Ingram. I think he's a guy that if you want to run a quick-paced, get the ball out of your hands type of offense, he's a guy that you can count on to do that, and he'll get you 6, 7, 8 yards a clip. But man, last year he averaged less than 8 yards per catch. Out of anyone that had at least 50 targets, he was the lowest in the NFL. So I don't think that's what the Chargers are looking for. I mean, played only 9 games last year due to a hamstring injury. Not a big playmaker, and only 36% of his catches went for a first down. Count me in on the Dallas Goedert sweepstakes over Evan Ingram. But now I think, David, it's about where do you pivot to, right? Because you have to have a plan now, and you have to be able to pivot a little bit, because you're not going to be spending the top money on wide receiver. So where are you going to put that money?
Well, it just seems like we need to listen to what the Chargers and what Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz have said that they want to do, and that is to build out and strengthen the interior of their football team, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. And yeah, it's not the sexiest position groups. It's not your receivers, your running backs. It's not going to be your corners. Probably it's the meat and potatoes of your football team. That's where I expect the Chargers to go spend big money. So I think they'll look at the Mekhi Bectons and the Tevin Jenkins and even Drew Dahlman, the top center available. They need to improve this football team on the offensive line dramatically. And if what they have said is any indication, I expect that they will try to do that in free agency on both sides of the football. I think you'll see 5 or 6 new names. Might not be top of the market guys, but I expect to be a lot of different football players being thrown into the mix there in free agency. And hey, it's right around the corner, and I am very, very excited to see exactly what is going to happen. Before we get there, want to give a shout out to my sister Tammy, who just got diagnosed with cancer. That's why I missed the Friday show. Thank you all for your support. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. A lot of people were reaching out to David. It was really nice to see, and you feel the sense of community in those moments. So as far as what the game plan is, there still are a lot of potential upgrades if you want to kind of go all in on the interior of the offensive line. I know it would make Chargers fans feel a lot better about the situation if you miss out on the wide receivers. And then, you really, really fortify the line and you live up to kind of the philosophies that you say you kind of want to uphold. It feels like they're trying to make good deals. Like you want them to be prudent. You want them to make the right deals. You want them to make the smart deals, and they hit on those, a lot of them last season. But when you have as much money that they have right now, you also want to see them take some swings.
You can be a little reckless.
Make some win now moves that are going to help them potentially make a run this year, and guys that you feel like could actually move the needle in that regard. They missed the two guys that moved the needle for me. Now, if you want to, go all in the trenches, it's still going to be risky. You're still going to have to pay big money to guys that, are going to be changing systems, going to be changing schemes. But I think for me, now the plan is, hey, go all in on improving your interior of the offensive line. Go all in on protection. Find a way to get the upgrades on defense that you want to get. Maybe you go find that, other corner to fill in with Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart to kind of complete that trifecta and find someone to spend money on while you have those guys on the cheap. It'll be interesting because they're going to tell us in the first couple of days exactly where they think the priorities are and where they think their weaknesses are. Because right now it's hard to tell kind of where they're urgent at or where they feel the urgency, because we saw today they didn't have the urgency to get the big deals done. And maybe they're going to say that's the plan all along. Well, then show us the plan that you have to make a better team in 2025 and take the leap that we wanted to see this team take, which is into contender status, because they obviously weren't that, and it showed in the playoffs last year. But that's going to do it for today's show. The good news is the free agency tampering period starts today. So make sure you guys are back here with us. Maybe a live show depending on what happens, who they end up signing. But make sure, as always, that you never miss the show by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding us every day on all of our social media, on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. It's going to go down. We'll see how the Chargers are. Maybe it'll be quiet on day one, and that is going to drive Chargers fans crazy. But whether there's a move, whether there's not a move, we're going to be back here tomorrow to talk about it, because it is your team every day. But until tomorrow, guys, when everything goes down, take it easy and go Bolts.